must not know what you just thought. Me and my bitch go. Hi, my name is. What? My name is. My name is.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Woo, we have to fix this camera situation. I don't know what happened all of a sudden, but here we are. But thank you for joining me. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump firmly into things. Those that went to the link in my bio and got a bingo card, just want to let you all know which bingo card I will be working from, and it's this one right here. This one right here. So go ahead and start by marking off that center block. Yes. And keep in mind, tonight, they may not be fact checking him in real time, but we will be. Okay? Because, baby, I've been waiting on this. I have been waiting for this. Okay? This is my Matlock moment. Okay? The prosecutor versus the convict. We have been waiting on this. We have definitely been waiting on this. Now, I know that Trump and the few handful of the GOP that are still like holding tight to Trump, but the vast majority of them are holding on to still tokenizing the military, still, going into all of these lies. Today, there was a ceremony to award the 13 that died due to the Afghanistan extraction. His extraction when he threw a hissy fit when he didn't win the election. But generals have come out and said, nope, we cannot blame the Biden-Harris administration. It was really them. They're also, the whole Haitians are eating cats in Ohio. Real quick before we get into this debate, let me give y'all a little background because y'all know I'm a background type of girly. In this particular city in Ohio, they were complaining about losing jobs. Rightfully so. They were losing jobs left and right. So a company came through. There were jobs from food service, janitorial, all the way up to the top. These people with limited cash was like, I'm too good for these jobs. I'm too good for these jobs. So a couple of Haitian immigrants came through and was like, what? These are good jobs. These are blue collar jobs. We can make a little money. It's not a bad community. We can do this. So, of course, they're telling everybody they know these people are coming through and they're taking the jobs that citizens didn't want. So, to save face, they're eating cats. And the story that they grabbed hold of and ran with was a U.S. citizen registered to vote in an entire different city, about approximately 2 hours away, who stood out in the middle of the street and ate a cat for some reason. We don't know why. We don't know why. But that's what they're doing. And the person who started all the scuttlebutt on Twitter is a right-winger from Malaysia. Now, I don't know how you U.S. right-wing from Malaysia, but beats me. And JD Vance had to come out tonight and go, well, the story may be false, but keep up the cute cat memes. They know they're not going to win. They're just going to show the country how despicable they are and how despicable their voting base is. Because at this point, they realize that the GOP is nothing but a reunion of the Dixiecrats. You're having a house party for this debate. Yeah. Queer people unite. But we're 1 minute away let's see what they got going.
Nuclear codes to begin with at any age. But the person we're seeing right now with the most powerful military on earth and the nuclear codes 4 years from now, after being president for 4 years, like, well, what are we doing here?
The Democrats put that decision on the table as what it means to be putting country before party,
yes,
putting country before self-interest, and being realistic about the limitations imposed by the job that's incredibly high pressure, and that does age even young people who have that job. I mean, the Democrats changed that in terms of what the expectations are for moral behavior around that issue when Joe Biden made the decision.
In the most brutal and anguished fashion with the most remarkable results. And then it was like, okay, well, I guess the age thing's done.
Yeah.
Wait.
Right, exactly.
The issue in those articles has been about so-called sane washing, which is really editing. It's taking a crazy Trump statement, finding some words somewhere in the statement, trying to stitch them together to somehow make sense that they don't actually make. And that's the thing that the press seems to now finally be working its way out of.
Yeah, and I do think that the press isn't a static thing. You know, rarely is
Hold on. Let's take a moment and let's discuss the irony of the press talking about the press and the coverage of the press regarding Trump. Like it's quite funny. It's now we're going to criticize how we all have collectively come together, not we all, talking about legacy media, to cover for Trump, but then tell the people that he is a threat, but not show them how great of a threat that he is. Not show him how great of a threat he is in real time, not fact check him in real time. Keep giving him easy softball questions and asking everyone else ridiculous questions. But, you know, like all of media, I don't care if it's in the center, right, or left, has allowed Trump to be looked at as great by his sycophants. Let's get into it.
ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Bingo cards ready?
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing.
Talk about
and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They've taken in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before. Probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums.
Absolutely.
And they're coming in and they're taking
the video
jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy.
Get straight to the point, girlfriend.
I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook. A bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad. but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died. Has there been anything like it? We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. The only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris.
Bounce back is for 6, not the.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan
she brought out his own alma
explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
Oh, she said he's not like us. He's not like us.
I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to
right after she just dropped the fire in the heat
value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work.
They don't want nothing to do with
create jobs and create a lot of
good,
solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan.
Her name.
And it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China, what he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you
They won't question if she black after this. Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it.
Say her name.
It will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
What is a Marxist?
Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he
what's
taught her well.
Marxist?
But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something
we don't know what he's talking about.
52 years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also.
Bet you do, because you want to rape
of Republicans
your own daughter.
Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. And now, Ohio, The vote was
Why do you
somewhat
keep bringing up
liberal.
Ohio? Is that
Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than
You
people
live
would
in
have
some
thought.
states, my boy.
But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to
Bro,
do it.
wasn't the
And the
people?
Supreme Court
They
had great
wasn't the
courage
people?
in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6
I guess I don't know
justices.
what a people.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies,
Come on.
and that's not actually a surprising fact.
Come on, Kamala.
Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the
Indeed.
intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade.
Exactly.
And they did exactly as he intended.
Mm-hmm.
And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral.
Can the church say amen?
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country.
Yes.
You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there will be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote.
That won't be
the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D.
You didn't discuss. Y'all just out here saying
he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't.
Right again, look, they don't talk to each other.
We don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it. Just like she couldn't get student loans, they couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it. And what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I
No,
have been a leader
it's
on
not true.
IVF, which is fertilization.
Whoever did
The
your
IVF,
speech
I
tonight,
have
you
been
did a
a
good job.
leader.
That
In fact,
you did a good job.
when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that?
Do you
Why
listen?
don't you ask her that
Why
question?
don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question? Would you
Because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer the
Wade,
question.
Hey,
Would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month,
Numb
the
nut.
9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President
I
Trump,
saw that.
thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter, He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield,
Ohio,
Venezuela? And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
No,
again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
We'll call him President Trump.
Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people.
For the village idiot.
Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people
were what was wrong with Afghanistan.
You were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far.
What? Is
In
that
fact,
history on
I
the
got more
planet?
votes than any president, sitting president
Lord,
in history by far.
Cut his mic. Cut his mic. Cut his
Let me
mic.
continue on immigration. It
mic.
was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police.
How y'all doing on your bingo?
How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country, and they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof, despite their fraudulent statements that they made. Crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with the same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal.
When have you won?
You saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all.
No, they didn't.
Complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. understand this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
Trump, shut the
This
fuck
is the
up.
one that
That
weaponized,
is Mike.
not me.
Those are the
She
rules. Cut the
weaponized.
mic.
I probably took
Cut
a
the
bullet
mic.
to the head
No,
because
the
of
rules are
the
to
things
cut
that they
the
say
fucking
about
mic.
me.
Cut the
They
fucking
talk
mic
about
off on him.
democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake
Trump.
Russia
We
investigation
do have a lot to
that
get.
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot.
Did you inherit? Well, you stole
of
the
that,
fucking company and changed it
I
from
built
Mary
it into
Trump's
many,
son to
many
Trump
billions of
organization.
dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it,
It was
they are
many, many
even
billions.
surprised. So
Your
we don't have to
original
talk
lie was that
about
it was
that.
100 million.
Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please.
Bitch!
Does that sound familiar?
Oh,
She went out.
It took you all night.
She went out
with that
in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical
Is he
left
back on the planet?
liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before.
Yeah, what now?
When they took over,
You did
they
what
got
now?
rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going
You
up
didn't do none of that
the
shit.
roof.
The
They
president doesn't
immediately
know.
let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher because you're talking about 3.5 years
No,
ago.
I would have been 4
They got
times,
it
5
up
times higher.
to
if
where
you
I
stayed
was
in office.
because they had no choice because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election,
Nobody
the
said,
day
let's go
after
back
that
to Trump.
election,
Nobody said
they'll go
that.
back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead.
You are
Fossil
destroying
fuel
the
will
country.
be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to
And the supply of
solar,
demand.
where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take
Now you like so.
400,
President Trump.
500 acres
We know how
of
solar
desert
panels
soil.
work.
Trump,
It
we have
dumb
a lot of
These are not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay,
I'd
thank
have
you.
been
We
a-
have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of
No
power,
worries,
which,
nerd.
of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but
He
it was
was in
more
the
than 2
dining
hours
room.
before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered peacefully and patriotically. I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and
So you said
patriotically.
peacefully.
And
What the
nobody
fuck
on the other side
patriotically
was
mean?
killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out of control police officer that
Jesus
should have
Christ.
never,
Oh,
ever
Lord,
shot her. It's a disgrace.
Jesus
But
Christ.
we didn't do this group of people that
It had
have
a
been
failed
treated so
self-defense,
badly.
bitch.
I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well,
On
I'm surprised
January
you're not
6th,
talking about the border
What
yet.
the fuck
That's
does she
because
have to do with
she
January
knows what a
6th?
bad
She was
job they've done.
MVP on
What
January.
about those people? What are they going to be
The inauguration
prosecuted?
was the
What are
20th,
these
boo-boo.
people from
But I am
countries all
told.
over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all
What does
over
that have to do with
the
January
world,
6th?
David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me
But
just
one
ask
of
you-
those, David,
Huh?
one of those people going to be prosecuted.
What?
One of the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted.
Minneapolis
or
is
in
fine,
Seattle.
Slim Dog.
They went into Seattle. They took
Seattle
over a
is
big
fine.
percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
You might ask her that
You
question.
were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a
Bitch, they
speech.
asked you,
I
did you
showed up for
regret
a speech. I
anything?
said, I think it's
Shit.
going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the
Shit,
mayor
Chris,
of
don't pick his ass
Washington,
back up.
D.C.,
Don't pick his
and
ass
the
back
mayor
up.
put it back in writing, as you
Okay.
know. I said, this is
And
going to be a
who says
very
go get
big
Katie back?
rally or whatever you want to call it.
Make sure ain't
And
no
again,
crowd
it
kill.
wasn't done by me. It was done by others.
You
I
can't
said,
control this.
I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected
None of
me.
the
Nancy
promises,
Pelosi rejected me. It was
things
just
matter according
2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't
Well,
responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January
Moderators getting
6th.
pissed off.
I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there.
They getting fed
And
up.
on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand,
Come on.
the
Remind him of
former
that.
president has been indicted and impeached
No,
for
he can't take
exactly that
accountability for a
reason.
damn thing.
But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville.
Ooh.
where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by.
And did.
So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was,
thank you.
I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back.
I want to abandon
it's time
here.
to turn the page.
Shown
and if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place
they don't care about democracy.
in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term.
Stop
And it was
turning
a
his
term
fucking mic
that
on.
related to energy because
turning
they've
that
destroyed
shit.
our
Y'all
energy
get
business. That was where bloodbath
You know
was.
what? Y'all
Also,
can go base.
on
Let me-
Charlottesville,
let me
that story has been,
let
as you would say, debunked.
Let me air-
Laura Ingraham,
let me
Sean
be-
Hannity,
Oh,
Jesse,
you-
all of these people,
let
they
me-
covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down
She's
to
been bad.
Washington,
She's been
D.C.
whooping
and let
your
her
ass.
sign a bill to close up the border because they have
She's
the
not
right to do
president.
it. They
What
don't
bill
need
is she
bills.
gonna sign
They
to
have the right to
close
do it.
up
The
the border?
president of
It
the
has to
United
go
States,
through
you'll get him out of
Congress.
bed.
Numb
You
nut,
wake him up
dumbass
at 4
bitch.
o'clock in the afternoon. You say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill.
Zach,
If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President.
people are killing many people.
if y'all don't cut his
We
goddamn
talked
mic,
immigration here tonight. I do want to
mute.
focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus. Truth in these times that we're
no,
living
go
in.
back and tell the people
Mr.
that the
President,
vice
for 3.5
president doesn't
years
sign
after
bills.
you lost the 2020
Jesus
election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that.
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in
No, I
2020?
don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes
It
any
went
sitting
through the
president has
legislature.
ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in
Once
2016,
again, y'all better
you
not
can't
ever
be
say
beaten.
shit about
The
me.
election,
I tell y'all
people
this
should
motherfucker-
never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We
Never
need two
again.
things. We need walls.
Never again.
We need, and we have to have it. We have to have borders and we have to have good elections.
We have
Our
that.
elections are bad.
Great.
And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No judge
Republican,
looked at it.
and said there
They
was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we
Standing
lost.
as far as what?
If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on
Doesn't
it.
have standing
I'll show
as
you
far as what?
Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania,
You've
and I'll
shown
show
us all of
we
that,
have
and
so
we're
many
involved.
facts and statistics. But you know what?
Mike Lindell
That
has
doesn't
gone
matter
broke.
because we have to
Look.
solve the problem that we have right now.
Defamation
That's
cases
old
have been
news.
lost.
And the problem that we
Because
have
you
right
lost.
now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by whiskers. So he still believes he did not lose the election.
Now he's just saying that now because, you know, his right-wing podcast
But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks ago. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States. And world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
And they are.
I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look,
Did this motherfucker say the pipeline was headed into Germany?
The most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump.
Nobody
fears no problems when Trump was president.
Nobody.
But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get
to. Now the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert.
Now you pissing
Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would.
What the Zionists talking.
And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know
This
is
tribal
that
defense.
this
I mean,
war must
I
end.
understand all the
It must end immediately. And the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the
baby.
hostages
You ain't
out.
got to regurgitate.
And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up. Far worse than people understand what's going on over there.
The Hamas,
when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris,
he wants to buy up land over there.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
And she's the one that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down.
Trump said
Putin
shortly
endorsed her
after
last
being
week,
criticized
said, I
for
hope she
getting
wins. And I think he
JD
meant it
Vance is running mate
because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way, gets paid a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
buddy.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
And the motorbike. Okay. All right. Okay. First of all, I know I was asking Madam Vice President, future Madam President, to let him up. Nah, my bad, girl, my bad. Don't let him up. Nope. Keep stomping him like you gorilla. Okay, march on that hoe. March on that hoe. Those of y'all that have been with me since the beginning of this debate, they laid out the rules for us, right? These were unwavering rules, right? Supposed to be muted, can't go over your time, but he would start talking and they would cut his mic on. This is what I said, and this is what I meant at the beginning, that the media as a whole, they'll criticize each other, different newspapers, different news outlets, different chat, like, but they keep softballing it. And when we look at Trump's political climb, even though it's descending now, and I've shown y'all proof after proof, time after time, how the GOP is just, they're done with him. That's why the usual suspects aren't coming to defend him. But we also have to hold legacy media accountable. We're looking at all these influencers where it's come out that they're being paid, but they're not the only ones getting paid. And also, let me put out this caveat. Now that people have been exposed for getting paid, which all of us have been saying from the beginning, that they have to be doing this for a paycheck because the shit that they're putting out doesn't make sense. If you have a favorite creator, whatever the social media platform that brings the truth, you need to protect them. Make sure you comment, share, like, favorite, all of these things, because everybody is getting hit with ridiculous CGVs from things that are months ago, things that nobody is even viewing, that are actual factual, because they still need the disinformation to go out. And these people have prepaid for this shit. Just because it's exposed, baby, they trying to deny, but it's all what did Madam Chicago say? It all falls down. Yep. And that's what's going on. So make sure you protect those people. But hold legacy media accountable. They are not muting him. They're unmuting his mic and letting him run wild. Now, we got to kick him in the head. Kamala say, we ain't here to play. We are not here to play. She said, play with Jesus, Allah, Buddha, or a few Hindu gods, but don't play with me. She said, try Milton Bradley, try Sonya, but don't try me, baby. She is coming immediately. And like I told y'all about a month and a half ago, nobody is really going to stick up for Trump at this point because the moderators are getting fed up. In my lifetime, even before I started covering debates and covering politics, I haven't seen, I've seen moderators fact checked. These moderators are fed up with Trump. The fact that they're snapping back and they're clapping back, first of all, I'm surprised he's there tonight. But whoever did his quick weave for tonight, kudos. Hallelujah. Okay. At least it wasn't Tyler Perry this time. Now, the makeup artist, you need some work. You might need to finally sit down and talk to JD Vance. but also for anybody, because the Trump tars like to come in here. Let me explain something to you, Macedonians. You just heard your presidential candidate admit on multiple positions, on multiple levels, he doesn't talk to his vice presidential candidate. So let's say, let's say the whole country loses its mind, and once again, Trump gets in office because we refuse to learn from history, which is plausible. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do? If the vice president and president are not in communication and not on one accord, child. Who child?
It has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly
You didn't want to say
being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more. Because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are.
More than one by now.
We're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't
That's extortion,
like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president. Okay, they respect me. They don't respect Biden. How
Don't nobody respect you.
Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin. Hasn't spoken.
Biden isn't over there.
That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get
yes,
it done.
I know you don't motherfucker shit.
Because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Yeah, say that.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Oh, he about to
Vice
cry.
President Harris, thank you. We've heard from
He
both
about
of
to
you
light
on
up
Ukraine
True
tonight.
Social when this
Afghanistan
goes.
came up in the last
He
hour.
is about to
I wanted
light
her to
up
respond to
True
something you
Social.
said earlier.
Oh,
and
he's about to shoot it.
please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting
Ooh, not
in
you
Moscow.
said quiet, please, to her. Why
much
didn't y'all
happier
turn
than
her
he is
mic
right
on when
now.
she started talking?
But eventually, you know, he's got a
Turn
thing
her
that
mic on when she
other people
started
don't
talking.
have. He's got
Do it for
nuclear
Trump,
weapons.
do
They
it
don't
for
ever
her.
talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening.
Tell her to
But
be
he
quiet.
does have that.
Tell her to talk
Something we
down.
don't even like to talk
Talk
about.
down
Nobody
to
likes to
one
talk about it.
more time.
But
Who
just so
got
you
5 on my
understand,
bill?
they
Who
sent
got
her to
5
negotiate
on my
peace before
bill?
this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate
How
with
was she the emissary?
Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started
The
3 days
United
later.
States is not the
That's the
one
kind of
negotiating.
talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden.
The
In my
emissary
opinion, I
shit.
think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She
Have
goes
you
down
seen the
as the
shit
worst
we do
vice
for
president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate as soon as they left. Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander in chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO.
I'm going to keep
got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems.
Wait a minute.
Why do you send me a picture of my
conversation
house?
with
I
the
said, you're going
Taliban?
to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish,
We leave brand new
they
military
blew it.
behind in our
The
own
agreement
country.
said you have to do this,
Pentagon did tell y'all
and
to
they
put
didn't
in
do it.
this money 'cause
They
they don't
didn't do it.
need it.
The agreement was
They don't
terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move.
And these people did the worst
that,
withdrawal.
baby. I done
and
already
in my
put you
opinion, the
through.
most embarrassing moment in the history of our country.
act.
And by the
I
way,
got
that's
all
why
the
Russia
receipts
attacked
on
Ukraine,
this.
because
Give
they
it
saw
to
how
me.
incompetent she
Awesome.
and her boss are.
Mrs.
President Trump,
Harris.
thank you.
Yes, come on.
I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black."
Debate.
I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care.
You don't care what shit.
You
bitch.
make a big deal out of something.
Once
I
again-
couldn't care less.
Once again, I'm going to
Whatever
jail.
she wants
Who
to be is
got
okay with
fired?
me.
It's on site.
But
Who
those
got-
were your
who got
words. So I'm
I don't
asking,
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and
When
I'll
did,
say
when
that,
did she say
and
she was
then
black?
I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
Oh,
I
he
think
is
it's, I mean, honestly, I
he's
think
trying
it's
hard. He's
tragedy
failing, but
that
he's
we
trying
have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
Say that, girl.
You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to Black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this. Want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
Stop calling him fucking president.
This is
Do
the
not
most
cut the goddamn mic back.
presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said, going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt the person, killed the person ultimately.
Why y'all
and if they
agree
pled
to
guilty,
these
then they pled, we're not guilty. But
Why
this is
y'all
a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had. A horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Why do y'all keep cutting his fucking mic on when it shouldn't be on?
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
Thank you.
One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people.
Maybe that ain't
I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers.
How about that?
That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to
President
policy. Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's
Turn
turn to
the
policy,
fucking
please.
mic off and just
to
ask the
defund
next
the
goddamn
police.
question.
She has a
Stop.
plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
She
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on
to
to
not
other
Don't
allow
talk over
fracking
him.
in
Cut the fucking
Pennsylvania
mic and
or
just ask the
anywhere
next
else.
question.
That's what her
Cut
plan
the
is
fucking
until
mic
just
and
recently.
ask the
I
next
think
Lindsay, go ahead.
question.
President Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
going
just
to
No,
move on.
let
Vice
her
President
talk.
Harris.
To what
Let her
President
talk.
Trump, this
Y'all
is
don't
now
listen
your
to
third
all this
time
shit.
running for
Let
president. You have long vowed to repeal and
disrespectful
replace the Affordable
You
Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You
What's
now
the
say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much
Just
better.
call them
Last
Democrats.
month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight,
I said,
9
right.
years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to
Y'all
replace it.
always
But
working on some
remember
shit.
this,
You be working on shit.
I
you working
inherited
on getting in the fucking
Obamacare
break.
because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better
The
plan
only
than
changes that need
Obamacare.
to be
But
made
the
are
Democrats came up,
regulations
they
on the
wouldn't
health
vote for it.
insurance
I had a
industry
choice
so
to
that
make
they
when I
can
was
stop
president.
hiking
Do I
prices.
save it and make it
And
as
they're
good as it
doing
can
that
be?
which is
Never going to be
actually
great.
benefiting the GOP
Or do I
because
let
they're
it
giving
rot?
people a false
And I
sense
felt
of
I had
what
an
is actually
obligation,
going
even
on.
though politically it would
How
have been
about that?
good to just let it rot and
How
let it
about that?
go away. I
Let's
decided, and I
use
told my people, the
call
top
the
people, and they're
dissidents.
very good people. I have a lot of good
Call
people in that
attention here.
administration.
Let's
We
fuck
read about the
the
bad
circle
ones. We
park.
had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it
And thank
and
you
make
for
it
question
as
up there.
good as
There
it
we
can
go.
be, or do I let it rot?
Mhm.
And I saved it. I did the right thing. But
You
it's
ain't never
still
did the right
never
thing.
going to be great, and
With
it's too
paying for
expensive
people
for
more.
people.
We don't need
And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do
You
it.
sound like
But
the
until
people
then,
from
I'd
Vito.
run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now.
Concepts of
But
a
if
Oh, you understand
we
that
come
you're
up with
not
something,
president
I would
right
only
now.
change
Y'all
it
catch
if we
that.
come up with
He said,
something that's
I'm not
better and
president
less
right now.
expensive. And there are
He does
concepts and
understand the
options
semblance
we
of what's
have
going on and where
to
the
do
power
that.
dynamic
And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in
I
2017,
hope
you
somebody got a
supported
clip of
Bernie
that.
Sanders'
I hope
proposal to
somebody
do
got a
away
clip
with
of that.
private insurance
I
and
hope
create a
somebody got a clip
government-run
of
healthcare
that.
system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns
Thank
away.
you.
So stop with the
Heather.
continuous lying about this stuff. As it
You
relates to the
don't own
Affordable
guns,
Care
but you
Act,
tried to buy one
understand,
after you
just
got
look at the
convicted as
history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60
I remember
times
that. You
he
remember?
tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Pass this
President
prologue
Harris,
in
thank
terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue
Well,
that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats
Obamacare
that kept it
for 10
going.
years when
And you know
Obama
what?
was only president for
We
8.
can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for
Anywho,
people,
I got
private
bingo.
medical
Anybody else
insurance.
get bingo? Let me know.
That's another thing she doesn't want to get.
President
People
Trump.
are paying privately for
Cut the
insurance
fucking mic.
that
Stop
have
trying to
worked
talk over
hard
him and stop
and
calling
made
him
money,
fucking president.
and they want to have
He is
private.
not
She
president.
wants
He is
everybody
not
to be
Joseph
on
Robinette
government
Biden. I'm
insurance
so
where
sick
you
of
wait
y'all right now.
6
I'm
months for
so
an
sick of
operation
y'all
that you
right
need immediately.
President Trump, thank
Y'all are
you. We have
part of the
another issue that
problem.
we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you,
It
they
did
lost
happen under
10,000
Donald Trump. We
manufacturing
watched
jobs
it.
this last
We
month.
got eyes and ears.
It's going, they're
have
all leaving. They're
Yeah.
building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did he get, why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Pretty sure before this debate, whoever the power of attorney is was like, you know what, DNR. And now that Madam VP Harris has killed him, resuscitated him, killed him, resuscitated him, killed him, resuscitated him. I'm just waiting on these final moments. Cause the casket has been built, shellacked, painted, shellacked. And Melania done dug the hole. Barron done concreted out the slot. And Ivanka, Eric, and Donnie Jr. and Tiffany done brought the lime. Actually, Tiffany done came to make sure, representing the family, that they get everything. Because this, and when he tried to say that he had been killing her, dominating her in this debate, baby, but that man gonna be punching the air for the next couple. Truth Social is about to be lit. Gertrude is about to have a field day. Anybody that's new here, I am Gertrude over on the Truth Social. Okay, I am good and popular over there. And for you Trumplicans, you Magadonians that come over here thinking that you figured out which Gertrude I am, no, because I proved the parameters after I got an invite, and I used the most common name that's over there, baby. So good luck. Y'all have ridiculed so many Gertrudes over there. Y'all ain't even close. Baby. Hey, baby. Hey, baby. Hey, baby. Hey, baby. Hey, baby. It's a wrap. It is a wrap. And like I said earlier, the abandoned Biden people that became the abandoned Harris. And yes, I know that there was an abandoned Biden, but they weren't as vocal as they are now. So that's why I denote them as anti-Blackness. You know that Trump is not a viable option. You know that Trump is not a viable option. We saw what happened when people wanted to put in protest votes, when Jill Stein popped up and people were like, I'm going to vote for her. She's not even on the ballot in all 50 states. RFK has already said that a Trump victory is a Kennedy victory. But we already told y'all what that agenda was. You didn't want to believe us. So at this point, y'all must have had wet dreams about Nazi Germany, because let's not forget, Nazi Germany learned from the United States. And nothing goes well when an elder chooses to emulate who they are supposed to be raising, who they are supposed to be a tutor to, who they are supposed to be mentoring. And the United States historically has never stood on the right side of history. Ever. Not ever. They'll tell you somebody did some fuck shit, but they won't tell you how they helped the fuck shit. They won't tell you how they brought the fuck shit to your front door. Because at the end of the day, they still want to make European Americans on United States soil feel comfortable. Celebrate me home. And see, somebody like me, I'm going to keep pointing this shit out. But, let's get back to it.
President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. It is at the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Final segment starts now.
Back tonight, the time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
He is not the fucking president.
He just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things.
Isn't that what you do?
Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
Because she's the vice
go
president.
Down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone
She
together
doesn't
and
live
do
in the
the
White
things
House,
you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it.
You didn't know
because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm
So who got bingo? I got bingo. Did you get bingo? If you were here from the beginning, you know the bingo card that I was using. Yeah, that was utter bullshit. But okay, Jay. Bingo, 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 bingo. Okay. Let me say this because it's extremely important. Support a Black woman today. If you did not pick up that Kamala Devi, D-E-V-I, Harris is more than overly qualified and that is who you should be voting for, I don't know what to tell you. I am not saying she is a perfect candidate. We will never have a perfect candidate because we don't have perfect people. So we need to stop the whole talking point of the perfect candidate, because until we can have perfect people, we're not going to have a perfect anything. Let's stop with that bullshit, because we're only looking for perfection when the person has a monochrome of melanin within their skin. We're not going to play no games here. We're not going to mince any words. But I also want to say this. If you're going to support somebody in private, support them in public. Because if you tell somebody that you believe in their vision and you believe in their worth and you believe in what they're doing, believe in it on all levels. Other than that, don't tell them that you believe in them. Because all of us joke about like the excerpts and the extra shows from American Idol and all these other shows where you can tell people, oh, I believe in you. And then when it comes to, they're not there. If you're going to push somebody to greatness, stand on business. If you don't believe in that person, just keep your mouth shut. But if you told somebody that they are destined to greatness, stand 10 toes down. Like, as always, that's my 2 cents. I put it on the table. You can pick it up or you can leave it there. And as always, each one teach one, each one reach one. And y'all, thank you once again for joining me. I'll see y'all next time around. Y'all be good. Well, goodish. Okay, get into some good trouble. Till next time.